If you're in Seattle, and you need to buy or sell a home, we'll be right there for you. Because we're the realtors that you can trust. So go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
You're listening to The Ron and Don Show on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Hey, you guys, what's going on? Happy Friday to you, and welcome to a Ron and Don edition of Ron and Don's Real Estate Only, brought to you by Ron and Don Real Estate. So don't forget, through the course of the week, you get to hear Ron and Don just like you used to hear us on Cairo. But on Fridays, well, the way we pay the bills around here, and really our passion is real estate, buying real estate, investing in real estate, and also taking real estate and turning it into a money machine, which we call a West Snowball. In fact, Ron is just finishing up with, how long have you been working on your project on Queen Anne?
Over about 16 months, 18 months.
Yeah.
But like a big chunk of that was getting permits in the city, finding a comfortable chair so they could look at our permit.
Yeah.
Like that usually takes about 60 days for someone to actually say, this chair's comfortable enough for me to look at this.
Yeah.
I kid you not, there was one thing where we had everything checked off except there needed to be a review of a tree, and which had nothing to do with the structural, nothing to do with engineering, nothing to do with the architectural plans. It was a tree. Yeah. And the woman in charge of the tree department went on vacation. Yeah. And I was like, it's the only thing I needed to get checked off to start swinging a hammer. I said, can someone else in the office? She goes, no. So it took her a month. So we had to sit around and pay all our debt service and all our vendors for a month so that she could drink margaritas and come back and say, yeah, your tree's fine.
Right. All right, let's talk about a headline that we saw in today's paper. What is the headline?
Oh, I got to play the Ron Explains song.
I was setting that up. What is the headline? Then we're going to play the song. Let me start again.
You guys need to come to rehearsals. That's all I'm saying.
So, Ron, what is the headline in today's paper?
Well, it was in Axios. It wasn't even in today's paper. But it's like, why is...
Wait, I thought you were going to play the Ron Explains right then.
Ron's got a map in his pocket, a chalkboard brain that won't stop it. Why's the sky blue? Why's the grass green? He's the sharpest know-it-all you've ever seen. Ron explains, from the cosmos to your drains. Big or small, he's got the brains. Don't you worry.
It's so long.
Ron explains.
An AI generated.
Ron, this today is called Ron Explains very quickly because Ron still has his super cold from the Super Bowl parade.
Holy cow, this has been brutal. Yeah. So this is an interesting concept in Ron Explains, and if you're listening to this, you might want to go back and check out the video because we have our charts up here to help explain this. So people, when they think about real estate, you want to pay a fair price. Nobody wants to overpay for real estate, and nobody wants to sell their real estate for less than it's worth.
And nobody wants to underpay for real estate. Actually, they do.
Actually, people do want to underpay for real estate. And so this is a very interesting dance, and when Don and I do our sit-downs, it's one of the things it's funny because you have one class of people go, gosh, Ron and Don, I don't know, you're the expert. No. And then when Don pushes them for like 2 seconds, they know exactly what their Zillow number is, exactly what their Redfin number is. Yeah. They've tracked every single house that's sold around on their block for the last 3 years. I don't know what it's worth. Golly gee, you tell me, guys, you're the expert.
That's exactly how it goes.
And then other people don't play dumb, and they have a pretty good idea of the range. Yeah. And so, but it is more of an art than a science because you're selling one individual thing. If you have, a can of seltzer, you can go through and put an exact price on that commodity.
And by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, Ron brought in a can of seltzer just
to illustrate that point.
Explain what he was explaining.
Or let's say
we have some great props. You should be watching us on YouTube or Spotify.
Let's take another thing like a car. You can go through and find a make and model of a car, go out online and come really, really close to what the price of that car should be based on the make and the model and the mileage and everything else. With a house, there may be only one of these houses in one of these neighborhoods, and there are neighborhoods in the Pacific Northwest where there might not be any houses that sell in a couple city blocks for years. And so when one comes up, how do you put a number on that house?
Yep.
So that's what we're talking about here. You're trying to find a list price. So as a real estate agent, what Don and I try to do most of the time is we want to put that house on the money. We don't try to play games of saying, oh, we're going to overprice, we're going to underprice, and try to induce different things that Don's going to talk about in a minute. You want to put the house on the money because if you put it on the money in the Pacific Northwest, typically things sell quickly. And if you don't sell quickly, your listing becomes stale and it becomes damaged and you lose value over time. And so the concept of what is a balanced market comes in, and then also how many houses are selling below list price and above list price. So let's talk about this concept first because that will inform the upper part of this chart. People always go, oh, it's a buyer's market, it's a seller's market. What does that mean? It's actually a technical indicator that economists use to talk about a balanced market.
I usually go, hey, it's a metropolitan market.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey-oh. Hold on.
Oh, hang on. Here.
So the balanced market, here's the concept. If you took the inventory of houses right now that are available in Western Washington and you said, okay, we can no longer take any new listings. We're stopping new listings. How long would it take for the current volume of houses to sell out? How many months of inventory on the current pace would it take? If it is three months, if it would take 3 months to consume those houses, that would be considered a balanced market by economists, technically. Anything longer than 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months or more, that is a buyer's market, meaning there are more houses in inventory than the current buyer appetite could consume in 3 months. The table tilts towards the buyer. Anything less than that, 0, 1, and 2, that would become a seller's market. So right now in Western Washington, we are at 2.6 months of inventory. So it is very slightly below balanced market, still leaning towards sellers. To give you a historical look at this, back in 2021, 2020, back in this time period here, it was down in some neighborhoods, some zip codes to 0.4 months of market. So this thing was absolutely stacked towards the sellers.
Because you had a lot of homes that were selling by or before the offer review date. An offer review day is usually about 6 days. That's when you try to get multiple offers, and then you get on the other side of the offer review day. That's where a lot of buyers are waiting now. In fact, we had a house yesterday. We wanted to see if it would go past the offer review day and then write an offer on it today. It didn't. It actually sold. But guess what? Our buyer is like, I'll be patient. Let's find one where it goes past the offer review day so I don't have to compete and the price doesn't get pushed up.
So we are very as close to being a balanced market that we've been in the Pacific Northwest for probably close to 8 to 10 years.
Wow.
It has been really pinned towards sellers for a very long time. So this feels like a balanced market. What does that mean? Well, let's talk about list price. So when you come to a list price, and Don, you, I think, are very good at pricing a piece of property. Before I get into the historical trend and where we're at today, how do you think about price when you look at a condo versus a house, when you look at neighborhood to neighborhood? How do you come up with your number? Because typically you're very good at coming up with the number.
Well, right now, I always ask people if you know your Zillow number, which they will say sometime. Maybe 10% of the people say no. Everybody knows their Zillow number. They know their Zillow number. And then I'll say, have you looked at your Zillow number over the last 10 years? A lot of people haven't done that. They're just looking at their current Zillow number. So let's say they're looking at their current Zillow number in 2025, and their current Zillow number is 1.5. Well, then they think about a friend of theirs or a neighbor of theirs that sold their house back, same house, maybe same builder, same neighborhood, back in 2022, and they're like, you know what? They sold their house back in 2022 for $1.7 million. So then the realtor walks through the door and they're like, hey, what? And they're shopping and they're talking to 3 different realtors. And they'll ask, the first question everybody asks a realtor is, what do you think my house is worth? And that's why I say, well, what is your Zillow number? Because I want to, and they'll say, well, when we finally get down to a conversation, If my house on Zillow says it's worth 1.5, but my neighbor's house is a similar house back in the spring of 2022 sold for 1.7, my house has to be worth, 1.8 or 1.9, right? That's what they think. Here's what they don't understand is back in 2022 in that spring, we were getting toward the end of the 2.8% interest rate, the 3. There were people going out buying multiple homes, as much home as they could buy. And that's where we saw people buying homes with deferred maintenance, waiving inspection, and just going, this money is almost free. I'm going to buy everything and anything that I could buy. So in 2022, you saw people going out competing, and on a home, like I remember a house over in Magnolia, it was on for $1.3 million. It ended up selling. In fact, we wrote on it. It went for $700,000 over in Magnolia back in 2022, right? So almost $2 million. So people are thinking to themselves, well, you know, my house must be worth more than that because it's 2025.
Because real estate always appreciates.
Yeah. So the thing is, it wasn't in 2022 when people saw that the interest rates were starting to go up, and then they went up quick, didn't they? They went up to 6, past 6, heading towards 7. And then you saw a lot of sellers jump on the sideline and go, I'm going to wait till interest rates start coming down again. Interest rates have trickled down, and right now we've trickled down below 6. But we're not at 2.8. And so what these homes were selling for back in 2022 was an historical high number. And chances are, even today, your house isn't going to sell for the 2022 number. So you can't look at your neighbor's house that sold in 2022. You have to look at the market today. Interest rates aren't at 2.8. They're at around 6, or depending on your credit, they might be at 6.5. As a result of that, right, there's not as much competition in the marketplace. The interesting thing, though, when you look at the 2022 number and now a 2026 number, the 2026 number is getting close to the 2022 number, but in a lot of ways, it's still not there yet.
But it's not going to be the same velocity, the same speed where
Correct.
you sell your house in a weekend. And so Don and I have been telling people in our sit-downs, we're going to go after this number, and we think we're in this range. But in terms of this happening like lickety split, we're going to have to be a little more patient.
And
than
we
have
say,
been in
and
the
Ron
past.
does click, and then we say
lickety
we
split.
does say lickety
So
split.
this is interesting. So this was a graph, and Axios started this article that inspired me to change this up a little bit, but the basic concept was theirs.
Again, on YouTube, if you want to look at the graph.
What percentage of houses are selling below list price? So let's think about that. You put your house on, we'll use your example of $1 million. That's what you think it's worth.
I did not use it. You don't listen to me.
$1.5 million.
Thank you.
And so what
And
percentage
I feel hurt.
what percentage of the time is that going to sell at list price or above, or at list price and below?
Yeah.
So back in 2019, 60% of the houses in America, or about 55% in America, were selling below list price, meaning people were going for every single dollar. They'd stay on the market for a month. They would drop the price once, and then it would sell. In Western Washington, that was closer to 50%. Then you see over the next 2 years that corresponds with that interest rate that Don was talking about. It just falls off a cliff. So think about this. In the U.S., it was around 35% were below list price. But in Western Washington, it fell below 30% of the houses.
Because in 2020, the spring of 2020, and that's when you see your graph plummet here. Spring of 2020 is when COVID started.
Right. And so you see 70% plus of the houses in Western Washington were at list price or above. And that includes all of the edge box houses where nobody did deferred maintenance. They wouldn't clear out their belongings. There'd be stains on the carpet. It'd be missing a window. Like all of those houses, that's a big chunk of this 60% back here were just the houses that someone died and they put a sale sign out in the front, and there's a reason it's sold below list price. Even those houses here were selling at list or above.
And to be honest, Ron, I don't call them edge boxes when there's a private conversation going on. We call them something boxes, rhymes with it boxes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so if you'll notice, that the U.S. and Western Washington are rising in tandem here across 2021, 2022, up to 2024. And so Pacific Northwest is below the national average because we have a higher demand for housing, but it is a lot more expensive. So if you think about that, that's really intriguing. We have a higher median sales price, and yet we're still below the national average, which means the economy here is very robust. Don and I have a good friend in Houston, Texas. He got an acre house that's 4,000 square feet with a pool for under $500,000 outside of Houston. That house, if you put it in Bellevue, is a $3 million house. And so even with that price discrepancy, we're still seeing it below the national average. However, between 2024 and 2025, which is the last time we have accurate data, you're seeing that the share is going down here locally while it's still going up to 2019 levels nationally. So this is beginning to diverge. And the way that I would interpret that is that we are seeing, as prices of interest rates are falling below 6, this demand is still going up. And this is when I talk about a lot of, like, when you read that headline about Amazon firing everybody but the corner office, it's not really true, because they will do a layoff to cull the bottom 10%, and they're hiring back a lot of those folks in big tech. So we're still seeing demand outpace supply here in Washington. And so when we think of this balanced market number, depending on your neighborhood, that may or may not be true. So in other words, there may be some neighborhoods, like if you're in Kent and you're in a community that's all condominiums, that's probably over here towards buyer all day long. If you're in some places in like Queen Anne or Magnolia or maybe Medina or some parts of Bellevue, it's probably still way over here pegged toward the seller. So that's why we do a Ron and Don sit down, to really dial into your zip code. I have a good friend that reached out that wants to get a water view house over here on North Lake Union. That's a very different piece of property than if you're buying a condo in Renton. So, like, we need to pay attention to the balance and unbalance, and also your neighborhood.
Yeah. And pay attention to this, and explain to people before we go why realtors or real estate agents have to be very careful about talking about schools. We're going to do that right now on the podcast, because especially here, I think I read something in the Seattle Times today saying that the majority of people now, over 50% of people that live in Seattle, have a bachelor's degree. That's incredible compared to other parts of the country. People that are moving here, especially a lot of people from China, from Asia, a lot of people are moving here from all parts of the world because tech is driving that. And so oftentimes we see in our open houses, people walk in the door and they want to know what the elementary school is, right? They want it because education is so important to them, and they're willing to pay more for a house. It used to be you'd pay more for a house if it was close to I-5 or if it was close to 405. Now people, and that's still important to folks, now people are, though, more concerned about the school, and they're also concerned about mass transit, especially the train that I've been seeing them. I read an incredible article about I-90 and why they're having a hard time making that train work. And it's because the bridge is floating, and you have a floating bridge, and now you have to create a floating train track. And that's what they're trying to figure out, so the train doesn't come off the track and go flying into Lake Washington. So that's why that train's not rolling yet. And we'll talk about that. That's a very interesting problem that they have. But schools become the driver. Transportation becomes the driver. 405, I-5 becomes the driver. Being closer to work becomes the driver. If you're in a place where, just look online and there's a school, let's say, that has my son's elementary school had a 10 out of 10 score. That's a huge driver, right? If you go down to Fedway, those elementary schools down there have a 2 out of 10 score. People aren't going to pay as much for that real estate.
Yeah, and so real estate agents can talk about schools, but they have to avoid what's called steering. So this is part of the fair housing legislation that we have in the anti-discrimination stuff. And so the reason why you need to be careful is because, let's say, what was happening, not really as much in Washington, but still happen in Washington. But you would see this. There's some undercover reporting and stuff that happened in places like Chicago and New York City and back Atlanta, where a real estate agent would go, oh, the client would come in and they were African American, and they would steer them towards a neighborhood that had a predominantly black high school or a predominantly black neighborhood.
If they were black, right?
If they were black,
yeah.
And so that, or if a Latino a couple came in with kids, they would steer them towards, oh, this is a Latino neighborhood. This is a school that has a lot of Latins in it. And so that's what you need to avoid. There's no harm in stating a fact. Like you can say, this school was independently rated as, an 8 out of 10 you can state that fact, but I can't say, oh, your son is a black athlete. You want to go to this school because you can't do that. You can't take a protected class and steer someone towards a neighborhood or a house or away from a neighborhood or house because of a protected character.
So if you buy a piece of real estate and let's say it's a 2 out, let's say you love the piece of real estate, you love the neighborhood, but it has a 2 out of 10 in the local school, that is going to affect the value of that piece of real estate now, and it's going to affect the value of that piece of real estate in the future, right? So Ron just bought a property he's been working on for the last year. He's near an elementary school that has a 10 out of 10, and he's near a middle school that has a 9 out of 10, and a high school that has a 10 out of 10. As a result of that, that becomes a driver for that particular house, not only now for people that are going to want to buy it, but certainly in the future, because it's hard to believe that if an elementary school that's been around since 1909, it's hard to believe you'll wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden it's going to be a 2 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10. So even if you don't have kids, when you're out shopping, it is important to look at the scores of those schools that are around, and also, is it close to a train? If it's going to be close to the train, though, you have to know the city wants things to be denser near the train in these corridors, so you're going to see a lot more middle housing in these areas as well.
So to put a bow around this thing for me, I think it's an exciting time for buyers and sellers for this reason. Back in this time frame where people were just acting irrationally, I think it was pretty easy to be a real estate agent. You just put a sign up front.
What's the time frame?
2020 through 2022.
For those not looking on YouTube or Spotify.
If you were a seller, you put a sign in the front yard and you would get offers. If you were a buyer, your agent would just say, we're going to have to escalate above list price. It was pretty easy. Everybody knew the game. Now we're getting closer to a balanced market. For buyers, that's a great chance. You can find houses that have been on the market for a while and actually negotiate for some things, then get a pretty good deal. For sellers, I think it's a good time because we are retaining relatively close to those pre-pandemic numbers. You're retaining a big portion of that. And if you get an agent that has good negotiation skills, you can still...
Why are you pointing at me?
Because you have good negotiation skills.
Thank you.
You can still put together a really solid deal. And so I like being in a balanced market because it reveals the skills of your agent.
Yeah. All right, time to go. I've been thinking about getting you, Matt, and I some sweaters and some shoes. We could play Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and then all at the same time, we could... Remember how you tossed the shoe?
Yeah.
We would all toss the shoe at the same time. What do you think?
Why are we doing that?
Because it's the end of the show. And anytime I get to the end of the show, I think of Mr. Rogers. You stop by the fish tank and you feed the fish. And then you stop by the trolley and you say goodnight to the trolley and to the mailman.
Sure.
You've already been in the land of make-believe and you've done all kinds of make-believe stuff, so you're back. Then you go, I heard one time you overfed the fish and killed the fish, though. That's a story, Mr. Rogers Undercover, that we'll talk about next week. And then he goes and you put the sweater on and you toss the shoe. I used to sit at home as a little kid and I would try to toss my shoe at the same time. But I didn't have the same shoe he did. I had like a big snowshoe. And sometimes I'd accidentally throw it into my head. And my brother and I would end up having shoe fights. And then I never had a sweater like that.
That tracks.
That's why I have everyone looks at my Mr. Rogers sweater now that I wear and I'm like, hey. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Hey, you guys, thanks for listening to this episode of The Ron and Don Show. Thanks to Matt for producing the show today. My son, who's the station voice, the 7-year-old version. Charlie, who is our mascot, who, by the way, he's doing a weird thing now where I'm naked and he's walking in the shower and he's licking up all the water. I don't know what that is.
My dog does that.
Yeah?
He's thirsty.
Well, there's water bowls everywhere.
He wants that water.
I know, but it's
It's moving water. Dogs like moving water.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, and salty water probably too.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I was thinking, thanks, Ron. Thanks, on. Thank everybody. Charlie Dog. Anything else?
Nope.
You want to sit down with us? Go to ronandonsitdown.com. We love to sit down and talk about buying, selling, investing. Sometimes people get in touch with us and they just have questions. And maybe it doesn't turn into a transaction, but it turns into a relationship and a friendship. And that's why we're here for you. Don't forget, during the week, the Ron and Don Show, just like you used to hear us on Cairo. And then on Friday, we talk about our passion, which is real estate. And the great thing about real estate, you guys, once you can get in the game, you really can build a wealth snowball. That's how I built my wealth. That's how Ron built his wealth. And that's why Matt can afford these amazing shorts that he has on right now. What are those Converse shoes that you're wearing? Those are fire shoes, huh? What are those? I love those. How old are you? All right, till next time, you keep your head up and your shoulders back, and don't forget that you've been listening to the Ron and Don Show. Ollie! On the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Well, that's it. Show's over. We'll see you next time on the Ron and Don Radio Network.